This is a Film Stories original podcast.
We find Vecna, we end this once and for all, together.
On December 25th.
We have a plan. It's a bit insane. Everyone in?
He knows where we are.
Watch out!
Get ready for one last adventure.
We stay true to ourselves. Stay true to our friends, no matter the cost.
Found you. Stranger Things, Season 5, Volume 2, begins December 25th, only on Netflix.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. You're ready to move your business forward, but first, you need to find the right team. Start your search with Indeed-sponsored jobs. It can help you reach qualified candidates fast, ensuring your listing is the first one they see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. See the results for yourself. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
This is Writers on Film, the only podcast dedicated to books on cinema. Hello everybody and welcome to Writers on Film. My name is John Bleasdale and I am delighted today to be joined by Mike Miley, who teaches literature at Metairie Park Country Day School and has written several books, Truth and Consequences, Game Shows in Fiction and Film, and is the co-editor of Conversations with Steve Erickson. And he has written a new book which we are going to talk about, a full title of which is David Lynch's American Dreamscape, Music, Literature, Cinema. Thank you for joining me, Mike.
Well, thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm really pleased we managed to get this together because this has been a sort of a long time coming. This conversation.
Yeah, no, I'm thrilled to do it. It's really great to get to talk about the book and especially in this format.
Yeah, the thing that I think David Lynch is one of these subjects. I mean, especially of course because of his recent passing. It's almost like his passing. It's a horrible euphemism, isn't it? His death it feels to me like the end of an era. I mean, we still have a few of them left, but it feels like the door is beginning to creak closed on a certain era of American cinema.
Yeah. I think, there's, like you said, there's a handful, the Scorseses, Coppola's, Spielberg's, et cetera, from that era. But I guess here, there is something unique, even among those people I just mentioned with Lynch in the way that he's not, I wouldn't describe him as necessarily a self-made auteur or artist. That doesn't feel quite right. But in the sense of someone coming from the midnight movie independent art school circuit and then moving into the studio world and essentially coexisting with the Hollywood machine for the bulk of their career without really compromising any of their signature style, vision, etc., and really in making the industry come to them aesthetically and critically, it's hard to find a more contemporary analog of people who have done that. I mean, you're maybe talking about Tarantino, right? As far as someone who has that kind of a seismic impact on the way people look at, talk about, think about not only movies but the director, and even someone like Tarantino wouldn't be able to do it without David Lynch. I mean, his first movie even has an allusion to Lynch that demonstrates how vital and critical Lynch has been to the idea of American independent film voices and style and things like that.
Absolutely. The cutting off of the ear referencing Blue Velvet, of course. I was thinking the same thing recently about Twin Peaks and how there are so many TV programs, and there's even just a sensibility of what you can do with television that would not be possible without TV. I mean, in the immediate aftermath, we got things like Northern Exposure, for instance,
Hmm.
but even like The Sopranos with those episodes, which they did like 3 or 4 episodes with Tony Soprano in a coma, and
Hmm.
really went into Lynchian territory. And I mean, I remember thinking even at the time, this is like David Lynch.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, so many of those what, peak TV or prestige TV shows started to think of themselves in those more touristy kind of terms that in that even though they take some of those formal approaches or things like that, none of them get as formally daring as that last episode of the original run of Twin Peaks. That's, as formally experimental as anything in Eraserhead or Fire Walk with Me, and it was on ABC. It's quite astounding. And I guess they had a more, I'm thinking particularly of The Sopranos, but maybe even other shows that had a more hesitant relationship to the soap opera melodramatic stuff that they were. And I mean,
Mm.
whereas Twin Peaks is sort of openly aware of its status as a soap opera and doesn't shy away from that kind of feeling that a lot of the prestige TV puts a lot of effort into hiding or denying the soapier melodramatic aspects of, to their detriment, I think. Uh, but that's just kind of in that bout to be taken seriously, right? They're trying to maybe distance themselves from more of that sentimental stuff where now, like, what are the things that people really love in about Twin Peaks? It is the soapier stuff and the more melodramatic music and things like that. And it's not it's not shameful, and
Yeah.
because it makes no bones about what it is, right? Where I think maybe when those other shows make more sentimental or soap opera-y turns, it's maybe because it's tinged with a bit of embarrassment that they don't need to have.
I mean, I'd always think of Angelo Badalamenti's sort of raising crescendo score where he goes up
Mhm.
towards the end of a scene and people start to cry, and
Mhm.
the end of the scene is coming. That music is telling you, it's using the grammar of soap opera and the vocabulary of soap opera, as you say, unabashedly, and it even has. I mean, it does one of those things you get in very few TV shows, which it has a TV show in the TV show with
Yeah.
Invitation to Love playing on the screen. And I was always thinking, oh, I bet David Lynch and Mark Frost, being who they are, they've got scripts for the whole run of Invitation to Love.
Yeah, I think there was a plan to make that a bigger thing, or there were talks about making it a bigger thing in the second season, but it just never really got the traction or went, they went in different directions. But yeah, that kind of that meta level that we think arrives later in television, it's very much there. I mean, it's maybe too nascent of a form and not developed as self-consciously, but it's there, and it's deliberate, and yeah, it's these fun things where it can still laugh at itself and poke fun at itself and still be the thing it's trying to be. That both and quality that runs throughout the show and throughout all of Lynch's work is kind of the thing that makes him, where so many other works gonna give us one or the other. His, in these dichotomies and binaries and stuff, his work is always, no, they're both present all of the time, mutually dependent, perhaps inseparable, perhaps all the same thing. And like we just get that throughout all of the work. And yeah, it's even there in something like Invitation to Love, right? The show is a soap opera and a parody of soap operas, and it doesn't have a problem with being both.
How did you first sort of come across Lynch? What's your sort of encounter with him?
Oh yeah, yeah. I guess my David Lynch origin story is I saw Dune in the theater when I was 5 years old. I had really liked I thought the poster looked really cool. My folks kind of let me watch whatever I wanted, and I saw this poster. I'm like, oh, I want to see that movie. That looks awesome. And because of course it's you've got all the Return of the Jedi toys at home at that time, right? So you're into that sort of thing. And I remember kind of like sitting on my aunt's lap, and when Baron Harkonnen like floats and all the stuff starts to ooze out of him, I was out the door, and like that's too much. I didn't normally get too scared and do things like that, but that was, Lynch scary and like regular movie scary are very different to even a 45-year-old, let alone a 5-year-old. But I wound up seeing the movie. I'm probably going back in and finishing it and seeing the movie a lot growing up. I think the second thing of his I saw was The Elephant Man when it was on like American Movie Classics or something like that when I was in the sixth grade. And then around the time that Reservoir Dogs came out, I was starting to get more into film and was reading stuff about movies. And of course, if you're reading anything about cool movies or midnight films or whatever, David Lynch's name's going to come up. And so from there, I don't remember where I went necessarily next in there. It may have been Blue Velvet or Wild at Heart. It was probably one of those two. And then I was kind of on the train. I remembered Twin Peaks being a thing when I was growing up, but it was more like, oh, that's a thing that adults are into. And so I never watched it. I just remember being at like a friend's house for a sleepover, and the parents were like, "Oh, we got to watch Twin Peaks," or that kind of thing. So it wasn't until I was later in high school and started. I was renting the VHS tapes of Twin Peaks to watch it, but you couldn't. At least where I was growing up, they didn't have the full series on VHS available for rent. You could get the pilot and the first season. But then if you wanted the second season, you had to buy this like 6 VHS set that had all the like on the slow speed, like the crappier speed for the videos, for the video quality. I had to buy that from like the movie store in the mall, Suncoast Movies. I saved up money my junior year of high school and bought, like took my birthday money and bought the Twin Peaks box set so I could see the whole thing.
And that's so wild, because I think I'm definitely older than you in that case, because I saw Dune when I was still a kid, but I must have been maybe 10 years older, maybe about 12, maybe something around then. And and I totally remember sort of like the crushing of the mouse in the sort of drink where you sort of suck at it, sort of like crushes the mouth, and then you drink the blood of the which to this day is sort of like, wow, that's ingenious. Such an ingenious and disgusting idea exactly at the same time. And when it was released, they did quite a lot of publicity on Channel 4, which is our sort of slightly I don't know how you would describe it. It's kind of it's a commercial TV station in the UK, but it's got a definite remit in its license to provide alternative viewing. So it has to be. I mean, they would show like American football, which had never been seen before, or Italian football. So American football, Italian soccer, I should say, for American audiences. And it would show more artistic. So you would have long interviews with David Lynch, for instance, and they had a season of his films to celebrate Dune coming out. So they showed Elephant Man and Eraserhead. It must have just been those two films. And maybe they showed some of his shorts. And I remember seeing Elephant Man. I didn't see Eraserhead. And I just thought, okay, wow, Elephant Man really blew me away. And I really, really loved Dune. I was kind of, and to this day, I have the Frank Herbert novel with the movie tie-in cover. And
cool.
Totally agree with you that poster was cracking. So sorry, this is a little bit of a long, it's a long question in a way, not really a question either, but I remember when Twin Peaks came out, it was very much suddenly David Lynch was in this mainstream that he had never been. He had sort of won back his reputation with Blue Velvet. Then Twin Peaks was like it was like Who Shot JR, who killed Laura Palmer. It was this really engrossing moment, and he was cool, the Pixies were doing covers of Heaven, and he was, he was a bit everywhere. And he was, Wild at Heart was going to come out, and that had the sexiest people in it, and was violent and scary. and I was like, I must have been 17, 18 at the time that came out. So that has been my relationship with him. Um, just to give you sort of you didn't ask for it, but there it is. But one of the things in the book that you to get back to the book and to get back to the expert, not the um, you look at this very much through the eyes of sort of intertextuality and the idea that Lynch is existing in this cultural atmosphere and is moving around. His artwork is moving around with other pieces of art. I really enjoyed this because I thought that you pick some really different points of view and points of comparison. So, for instance, in Mulholland Drive, it's not just Day of the Locust by Nathanael West, but this other novel which I have read, but a few years ago, The Dream Life of
Balso Snell. Yeah.
Snell.
Yeah. I mean, I initially was because I was thinking, there's some of the connections in the book are more investigating things that just felt like they resonated to me and seemed to make sense, and I hadn't seen other people talking about them. So I thought, oh, well, I've got to see if there's more there. Like that would kind of be the episode 8 of The Return, Cormac McCarthy kind of stuff, where I thought this just from the first moment I saw it, thought this feels like Cormac McCarthy, and just investigating that from there when I saw other people weren't making this connection. Then the other ones are like in the case of the Mulholland Drive and Nathanael West connection, looking at things that people have mentioned offhand, but don't really delve into any further. That felt to me like a real oversight. Like, yes, we can name check any apocalyptic or dystopian Hollywood work and say Day of the Locust and move on. And it's just a shorthand for that vibe. But there's maybe a little more going on than that. And then when I started to read the other West novels, I thought, oh my God, these are even more what Mulholland Drive is doing than Day of the Locust. And then when you put them all together, it really is this entire Westian sensibility adapted to film, where you can almost look at it like it's an adaptation of West in the way that One Battle After Another is doing something with Vineland or something like that, like or Cronenberg's Naked Lunch, or something like that. It's this unusual kind of adaptation, and that seemed really fun to me because I know adaptation people tend to talk about it more in a one-to-one or a clearly direct relationship, and there are certainly modes of adaptation that work in that way, but I also think that the way people move through the world and interact with art is seldom that one-to-one connection that is easy to trace out, or as easy to trace out as an adaptation. And then when you think about it in terms of, I don't get into this in the book really, but Lynch's approaches to transcendental meditation and his kind of bigger senses of just things being in the air, it seemed a really fitting way for just thinking, well, here's how this artist's mind works, and we can see we know the things that were in the air and popular during his lifetime, and we can maybe see how do these things churn up in his work. And then when I found in Balso Snell the useful metaphors that West uses and mapped them onto Mulholland Drive, it felt so crucial to understanding this kind of approach to looking at the film industry and to how movies work on people and how media works in the modern landscape, that it felt really useful to just spend some time mapping that out for people.
Yeah, and I think the idea that I had, following his death was that we weren't taking David Lynch as seriously as we used to. Partly because of the sort of the memification of these great directors as something that we lose when we make them cuddly and we make them into sound bites and jokes, essentially, even though they're affectionate jokes. I would argue that Werner Herzog is one of those who has suffered greatly from this, that people know Werner Herzog as a sort of Simpson cartoon rather than as, the director of, Fata Morgana or, Aguirre.
Yeah.
It, it's a real problem. Um, so it was really interesting that you brought up West and McCarthy as well. Explain the McCarthy one a little bit, because that one maybe people are a little bit less familiar with.
Oh yeah. So episode 8 of Twin Peaks: The Return has this extended sequence in the second half of it around the Trinity test of the atomic bomb in the US, and then that in some way conjures up not only Bob, that's all evil in the world, but maybe also Laura Palmer being sent as a response or an antidote to the workings of Bob. And then there's this segment in the New Mexico kind of neighborhood where this sinister character kind of goes around and takes control of the radio and says this cryptic poem, kind of like the Fire Walk with Me poem, but instead it's this is the water and this is the well, drink full and descend. The horse is the white of the eyes and dark within. And it like lulls everyone to sleep and allows for this pre presumably radioactive kind of mutant to be ingested by this young girl, who may or may not grow up to be Sarah Palmer. But when I heard, even watching it that first time, when I heard this poem by the woodsman or the fireman, it's the woodsman, right? He when he said it, it's like, this sounds like something Cormac McCarthy would write. And then I was remembering that, oh, the middle volume of the Border trilogy, The Crossing, also ends with a oblique veiled depiction of the Trinity test. And
The
so
sun,
then
the sun coming up.
this like double sunrise where the Billy Parham, the main character, is like this sort of dazed guy, is just sitting in a gas station and encountering this mutant dog. And yeah, there's like the sun comes up twice because the first sunrise is the test, and this just got me, okay, there's a lot of echoes and overlap happening here. And these why, like, these two artists who are so preoccupied with kind of primordial forces of evil and energy and stuff like that, there's something going on here. How can I show that these works are in conversation with each other? And so yeah, that's what led me down that road. And yeah, and it gave me an opportunity to spend a lot of time with two things that I really like, like The Crossing, and then with Twin Peaks: The Return. And yeah, so that's kind of how I arrived at that connection.
I mean, that was one of the most stunning pieces of television I've ever seen. And I wrote quite recently, I think maybe even yesterday, Jim Jarmusch came out with a comment about the most complete piece of cinema he's seen in recent years has been Twin Peaks: The Return. So,
Oh, no way. Oh, that's cool.
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I think its elevation. I mean, its recognition was almost immediate as an absolute unique work of art, which goes well beyond even the original Twin Peaks as a piece of. I mean, I think that's obviously the first piece of intertextuality that you could talk about really with Twin Peaks: The Return. Is it has a relationship to its predecessor, which is not as straightforward as just being a continuation or sequel. I mean, I think that's one of the things that you could. Well, I found baffling when at the very beginning of watching it. It was like, well, we're not carrying on the story, or we're not, and yet with each episode, you sort of it succeeds in relinquishing the need or the desire to do that.
Yeah, or maybe even going so far as to interrogate or like even admonish the audience for those desires. And I think Firewalk with Me very much does a similar thing. And I mean, this is what's really fascinating about the Twin Peaks as a body of work, is the way that each iteration is a response to the previous version and to the discourse around the previous versions, and for it to happen with the return in an age of so much fan service and ideas around continuation of IP, that it's all about just sort of delivering more of the same lore and just giving people the things that they're expecting and stuff like that, which I mean it's certainly heavy on lore. That's definitely the case, but the way that it forces us to confront the things we thought we wanted from this show and realizing how toxic those things are. Because and this is why it needs to be so long with so many things apparently not happening, is to create this productive frustration of, well, why do I want Dale Cooper to come back and save the day? Why am I so dedicated to this idea that some lawman can come in and restore order? Don't you know that's not possible? And then, by the time he does come back, it is fulfilling for a moment, but then the consequences of it are so dire and by then you're really primed to understand how what the show has to say about the evil that men do and the irreversibility of all of these things, and how damaging the desire to control can be, and on and on and on, right? And I think that sure, you could get that in other less frustrating ways for a viewer or for a fan, but I don't think it would be as productive and meaningful, because we have to sit with all of these things. And at the same time, we're also sitting with the one way direction of time as we are looking at people who are no longer with us, because who are on the show and who have died in between the show being shot and airing, or there's other people who can't be on the show because they have already died. All of that kind of stuff, I think, is also working with it, where we're just being forced to reckon with the things that cannot be undone, and how those ram up against the desire to undo things that have been done. And so, of course, what's the biggest can't put the toothpaste back into the tube moment of human history is probably the atomic bomb, right? Like that's like, because now like you can't not do that again. Like you can't undo that, and the ramifications of doing it stay with you for has a radioactive half-life of millions of years. So like, good luck trying to you can't even get rid of it. Even if all the bombs are gone, the after effects, the fallout is still with us.
Yes, you have this term. I'm not sure if I remember it correctly. Is it mega object?
Oh, the hyper object.
Hyper object.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's just the scholar Timothy Morton's
Mm.
work about that. And yeah, and Morton's work mentions things about Twin Peaks in there. It mentions Bob as a hyper object, but it was all written, I think, prior to The Return coming out. And so I'm extending Morton's discourse about
Mm.
this to incorporate another hyperobject in the book, about the atomic bomb, or nuclear fallout. And yeah, it's looking at these things that are so big, vast, and all pervasive that we have no real way of talking about them in real terms. It's all, and I mean, the nuclear fallout is an abstraction to us, basically, in the same way that like I think Morton uses the example of like the Florida Everglades or something like that. It's just too massive to talk about as a single entity, even though it is. And so here we look at how Twin Peaks kind of uses that logic for everything, right? It just about how these single entities also have this all-encompassing nature that affects everything around it, and that you can't separate, and it also can't forget about, because now suddenly once the bomb is in Twin Peaks: The Return, it's in every episode of Twin Peaks from the ABC show. It's, the way it's contextualized forces you to now blanket it over everything in a way that is really profound and really upsetting, but also brings you back to, well, that's how it is in this world too, right? That's not just in the show. That is the nature of our lives after 1945.
And in a sense, that's also the sense of intertextuality, that you don't necessarily have to show that, David Lynch read Cormac McCarthy. It's just that they're both responding to the very fabric and texture of post Trinity existence.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, or even like in the music section of the book that talks about something like a teen tragedy ballad in relation to Twin Peaks, there's no teen tragedy ballads on the soundtrack to any iteration of Twin Peaks, yet the narrative style and substance of that kind of music that Lynch grew up hearing is what Twin Peaks is, right? It's the teenage soap opera of death and of untimely early death and the tragedy and grief that surrounds it. And so, yeah, it doesn't need to be on the soundtrack because it's there. It's in the air, it's in the world. This is a way of a narrative way of dealing with these things that it's a genre unto itself that Twin Peaks is participating in.
Yeah, I mean, the Shangri-Las were invented by David Lynch retrospectively, I think. I don't think there's any doubt about that with the motorcycles and
yeah. I mean, those are a lot of those songs are like little movies or radio plays. They have all these sound effects, the sort of the breakdown bridge that almost has wind blowing through the trees while someone talks. It's like where they're not singing anymore. It's when I got out of the car and I looked for Eddie, or whatever.
Yeah, whether he heard me, I'll never know. Look out! Look out! Look out! Look out! Yeah. Leader of the pack, the best, one of the best songs ever. I mean, that's
such a banger.
Right, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this goes with his method, and we can sort of skip back a little bit and talk a little bit about transcendental meditation as well, because there is an element I feel when I first watched Eraserhead. I remember there's a bit where Jack Nance steps into an elevator, and I almost thought to myself, I'm really going with this. I hope the elevator doesn't move immediately. And it didn't. And then the doors closed and then he goes. But there's this sort of 3 beats of lateness. And I felt that I had somehow caused that to happen by wanting that little, and it feels like there's this interaction between the viewer and not all viewers. Obviously, some people feel, just get frustrated or disgusted or run out. But there is a sense of like, I'm going to take you so far and see how far you'll come with me. And there's a back and forth. And I thought in that episode of The Return, the one we're talking about, I think it's episode 8. I watched it very recently, and there's the bit where we go into the bomb and we just have like electrical sparks and ash, and we're just moving and it's like 2001 the Stargate sequence, and we're just going in and in and in, and it felt like my monkey mind has gone silent, as the TM handbook would say, and I'm approaching a point where I'm just receiving now. I'm just which is dangerous, because then receiving later on in the episode becomes exactly the way that you might receive something you don't want to receive when the woodsman recites his poem. So it's oh man.
Yeah, I mean there is a disarming, the some of your intellectual faculties are sort of awed into submission or silence, and you have to watch it so many times just to get past that experiential sense of awe that comes from this freaking moonshot of a of a narrative leap that and the amazement that it's getting pulled off. And then you've got to try to figure out, okay, yeah, what is this doing to me and why? And yeah, now you're bringing up something interesting. How is it different from the woodsman's lullaby of sorts that that puts everyone to sleep? Yeah, and that's the I mean, like I've been struck by the juxtaposition of like the Dune line, "The sleeper must awaken," with the Return line, "We live inside a dream," and it's like those two poles, in some ways, seem to be what's always happening or being shown to us, is that we live in a dream and we need to wake up and realize we live in a dream. That I feel like that's some of the stuff that's happening there.
Yeah, I mean, we need to wake up, but at the same time, it's a yin yang, isn't it? It's we need to wake up and then go back to sleep again. I mean, we can't have one without the other. We can't, we can't have dreams unless we sleep, but they make no sense unless there's a waking world to which to compare with which to compare them.
Yeah, and I guess like his work and Twin Peaks in particular is maybe constructing for us a way to distinguish between those harmless dreams or helpful dreams and the harmful ones, which like the town of Twin Peaks is living in the original series. They're living in a dangerous one, right? They're living in this dream of nostalgia of the Eisenhower era when the yellow light means slow down instead of speed up, all of that kind of stuff that has facilitated this blind eye that can be turned by everyone to the very horrific trauma that is happening inside the Palmer household and in other parts of town. In the same way that people, that 50s idea of America has put people into a slumber to not recognize the horrific stuff that dream was built upon, like the atomic bomb or something like that. And so the show is helping people kind of distinguish between those different dreams so that hopefully they're not getting duped by those more harmful dreams in their own lives, but that how does one access that awareness, that consciousness, I guess would be through some kind of dream state that delivers greater insight. But that it maybe fits into that thing you're describing of kind of waking up and then going back to sleep and I guess dreaming better or dreaming differently afterward.
Samuel Beckett style.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I caught it. I caught your intertextuality. The idea that you also bring in one of the chapters of children's literature is interesting because that is in a film which, to some degree, I think, do you refer to it in terms of Blue Velvet, correct?
Yes, that's right.
And that was a film that I think Lynch himself had sort of described as a sort of Nancy Drew mystery, or one of the reviewers did. I think it might have been Lynch though.
Yeah, he mentions the Hardy Boys.
That's right. Yeah, not Nancy Drew, the Hardy Boys. Quite right. And many people will sort of think, "Oh, wait a minute, how is that a child? How does that relate to child literature?" So I'll let you take this one.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I guess from a great enough distance where you can't see maybe all the R-rated stuff, all the narrative tropes and moves and things that are happening in Blue Velvet are your basic childhood quest tale I mean, I guess some of it is maybe Joseph Campbell-y sort of stuff, but I think that Jeffrey, encounters a strange object on the edge of the dark woods and decides to go inside and encounters, true evil and wildness that he discovers is also inside himself. And he's got to come back after he slays the dragon or whatever and come back restored and reformed. And I like the way that, yeah, from a really messed up angle, Blue Velvet's a fairy tale. It's a fable. And I think it kind of, in some respects, makes no bones about that. But it's obviously a whole lot darker and more disturbing than your average childhood bedtime story. But then again, so is Maurice Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are, right? The contemporary response to it was, this is too dark and scary for children, right? This is a little too psychologically real and gritty. And obviously there's differences of scale between the horrors in Where the Wild Things Are and those in Blue Velvet, but I think they're kind of following the same template that can be mapped onto each other. And certainly the Freudians and the Lacanians have fun with Where the Wild Things Are. They also have a field day with David Lynch, right? So there are these kind of echoes and harmonies that are happening there. But it just got me kind of thinking about, okay, if we do take this, I mean, it's almost like an offhanded joke, like, oh yeah, Blue Velvet, what a great children's story. But like, what if we take this joke seriously and investigate how it does play with the traditions and the formulas of a children's story and uses them maybe to some different ends, in perhaps the same way that Sendak does, where they both challenge our ideas about what the fantasy world and what the real world is and what it means to what if when we confront our wildness, we don't actually vanquish it, but maybe come to terms with it or bring it back with us in different form. Because I don't think they that either of those stories, when they return, they don't return like, oh, and everything's back to normal and all the wildness is gone and the monsters have gone away and all of that. Like they come back with a real sense that the new order that's been restored is cannot be put back together again. It is tenuous, and that wildness will return. And because it was always there to begin with, and we just couldn't see it. In the same way that underneath the ground of Lumberton, it's always there, right? If anything, it's the fertilizer creating the thing that we're saying is the not wild stuff. And so I thought all of that was like an interesting way of understanding Lynch's approach to some of these so-called opposing forces of darkness and light, or good and evil, that wildness and tameness and things like that. I think let's just talk about it in the same way that we talk about children's literature, and we wind up having a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, and even if you don't go so far back that you can't see the R-rated stuff, but instead go into it. I mean, Dennis Hopper is going mommy as he's
right.
During a horrific sexual assault, but at the same time, the fantasy he's playing out is trying to sort of conflate, crush, smush together his need to return to the womb and his desire to go into the vagina. And what Jeffrey kind of is learning is that there's a side of his sexual identity which isn't being a nice guy. He's turned on by not being nice, and that makes him question his whole moral identity, really.
Yeah, right. And he's there on the on the precipice of adulthood without a father to guide him, and he's going to be pulled back and forth between I mean, I'm oversimplifying these things here, but like the nice girl and the bad girl.
I don't think you're over. I mean, the film invites you to oversimplify it. I mean, when he goes to Laura Dern's father's house, her father is wearing a gun. Even at the house, it's like I am the law with a capital L. You can hear Slavoj Žižek sort of literally drooling over the image.
Yeah, and what's fun too is like and this took me a long time to realize, like, Sandy is a little like not as good of a girl as like we're so wooed by the surfaces and by the way it's presented to us, but like, she listens in on her dad's conversations. She's, totally going into these things with Jeffrey. Like, they're both, like, they're not the squeaky clean good kids, right? They're freaks.
Yeah, absolutely.
They've got some interests that they are pursuing that they don't think of as being dark, and then they kind of find out, oh wait, yeah, we went a really long way to find out we were always at home.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, she even says, "I can't work out if you're a detective or a pervert." I mean, that's obviously in her head that he could just be getting his jollies. And I mean, I think I might have even mentioned this on the podcast before, but one of the sort of there are certain scenes in that film which are so funny and so you should not be laughing at exactly the same time. And for me, it's always when Isabella Rossellini shows up. Dorothy shows up outside of his house when he's bringing Sandy back. And it's just like, what could be the worst possible end to a date? And it's a naked woman showing up covered in bruises and shouting, "He put his disease in me." It's so terrible and so funny it's just I must have a sick sense of humor, but that cracks me up.
Yeah, I mean, no, I think you're right. I agree with that. And I guess you've probably seen The Squid and the Whale, right, where Noah Baumbach uses that very thing to great humor, right, where the Jeff Daniels character, the father, says, oh, what movies are playing tonight? Oh, there's this movie, Blue Velvet, should be interesting. And he takes his son and his girlfriend to it, and it's a hard cut to her screaming, "He put his disease in me." It's like, yeah, that's a great date movie to go with your parents too. Great, no notes, right?
Absolutely, it's genius. I mean, with Wild at Heart and moving on to Lost Highway and Mulholland Drive. I mean, I remember Wild at Heart didn't get the accolades that Blue Velvet got. It was by
Yeah.
no means as received solidly. Firewalk with Me at the time was considered a disaster, but has since been very much reappropriated and revalued.
Hmm.
And personally, I went to see it at the cinema and thought and was and thought, oh, this is rubbish. I don't know what's going on here, and I'm lost. And I've since rewatched it many times, and it could even be one of my favorite David Lynch films.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Lost Highway was equally, I think, considered something of a misshit when it came out.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it wasn't really until Mulholland Drive that people sort of turned back to. Did you
Yeah.
get a sense of that when you were watching them as they were coming out, or how did you feel?
Well, I guess some of them I saw in such a clump together that
Mm.
I mean, certainly I did not like Firewalk with Me the first time I saw it because I was coming right off the heels of binging the original series, and I watched this, and I was one of those people who was like, "Hey, this isn't the thing I wanted. Where's all the cherry pie and snappy jazz songs and things like that? And what's this Chris Isaac, Kiefer Sutherland thing doing here?" And I definitely had that reaction. But then again, I would watch it periodically. For a movie that I claimed to think was really off the mark, I certainly went back to it a bunch to where I maybe wouldn't have seen it in a few years and in my 20s would still remember some line from the Chris Isaac stuff, like it stuck with me. And then of course, watching it again, getting ready for the return to come out, I thought, oh wow, this or just every time I saw it, I thought I appreciated it a little bit more, and to the point where now it's not my favorite David Lynch movie, but I wouldn't argue with anyone who says it's his best or most accomplished. I don't know how much the degree to that depends upon having seen all of the other stuff of Twin Peaks. Like I can't tell anymore, like, does it stand on its own or does it only really have its power in relationship to these other texts that it
Mm.
is in dialogue with? I don't know. I don't care, right? Like, because I've seen those, so I can, like I'm dialed in. I can really love this. Lost Highway, I saw in the theater, and that was I really loved it. And
Mm.
because I was also, I mean, I was 17 years old. So like I was primed. I was a 17-year-old fan of Nine Inch Nails and Smashing Pumpkins and all of this stuff. I mean, this movie was made in a lab for me. And it was the kind of thing where I grew up in Lafayette, Louisiana, where it did not play in Lafayette, Louisiana. I saw it in New York when this was like the first thing I did for graduating high school. My family, like, we went on a trip to New York. First thing we did was look at the movie listings. Lost Highway starts in an hour. That's what I want to do, and so that's how I saw it. But the
With your parents?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh man, we saw some movies on that trip, John.
Okay.
That was I took them to Rocky Horror. I took them to Pink Flamingos because it was having its 25th anniversary
Oh,
re-release.
wow.
My mother loved it, uh, and I took them to Cronenberg's Crash, which was also in theaters. They did not like that one so much, and they wanted to leave. I was like, "Well, I'm staying. Y'all can go if you want." Um, but so yeah, that was quite a trip. But then I had come back to Lafayette as being, the only person who had seen the new David Lynch movie, and it was a matter of waiting for it to come out on VHS, and then every weekend having a different person over to watch Lost Highway and stay up till 3 in the morning talking about it, trying to figure out what it was about, and really learned a lot probably about film language, film study by, watching this movie over and over with a bunch of different people and talking about how do we put all these different pieces together. And so I guess in hindsight, I realized that that wasn't a movie people really respond as many people responded to it. But I was like the perfect target for that
Mm.
movie at that point, which also made me the worst target for the Straight Story 2 years later, right? Where I'm just like, oh, what is this G-rated David Lynch movie? I'm 20 years old and like edgy. This isn't, this is dull. And I think this is the movie that in 10 years from now is going to be in a top three David Lynch movie conversation, probably. Like we're not there yet, but I think that's going to be where discussion goes. And then Mulholland Drive, that one, that one, I this is maybe this is a longer story, but so I was a first year directing fellow at the American Film Institute when Mulholland Drive came out, and every week at the AFI they would have a film screening of a new movie with they called it the Harold Lloyd Masters Seminar, and they'd have a filmmaker come and talk about the movie right after you watch it. It was usually a new movie that was about to come out. So 2 weeks before Mulholland Drive came out, we saw Mulholland Drive on campus, and David Lynch came and did a Q&A.
Oh,
And
wow.
I mean, I think at the time, you know, I mean, what a horrible room to see Mulholland Drive with a bunch of film students who only like the movies they make, but but and don't really are offended with the idea of having to watch other ones made by other people who aren't as cool as they are. So I mean, I remember at the time being struck by the it feeling like, oh, you can tell this is like a TV pilot that got turned into a movie, like this feeling more of that episodic, choppy kind of stuff, but being higher on it than a lot of my peers were, because I mean, there's just things in there that are undeniable, right? The Winkies scene, the Club Silencio scene. I mean, the entire, final half hour. Is probably the most devastating half hour in movies, apart from like Woman Under the Influence or something like that. And uh but then because I'd seen it early, then of course I had to take my wife later. It's like because she was a big Lynch fan, like, oh, we got to go see this movie. And that one pretty clear from the beginning, oh, okay, this is a great one. And then so yes, I had responded pretty strongly to those. And of course, I think Mulholland Drive's esteem has only grown since it has come out, which is kind of remarkable because it was pretty universally hailed when it arrived, and it's only risen since, rightfully so, right? And then, I mean, I was on the Inland Empire train very early. Like I remember seeing that in the theater and just being blown away. That one, the end of that movie, I find, I mean, it moved me to tears when I saw it in the theater. And like, I think the entire Inland Empire chapter in this book is me trying to explain to myself why the end of that movie makes me cry, and that's just sort of because that felt similar to Twin Peaks: The Return. Like those two works feel like this compendium, like where Lynch is really taking everything in his career and putting it all together in this new context that makes you, appreciate and engage with that film, but it's also making you think about all of his other work up to that point. And Inland Empire, for me, has this moment in it that explains why people even bother doing any of that stuff in the first place. Like why make art to begin with? Inland Empire is the most powerful example of why, I think, to me. So yeah, so that's a very long answer to your question, but like that's kind of how I encountered each of his subsequent movies. Once I had kind of known who he was and known this is somebody I really like, and kind of going in knowing I'm going to see a David Lynch movie. That was sort of where I went with them.
I love that what you just said about writing that entire chapter to justify, or not to justify, but to explain to yourself or work through why it hits you so much in the feels, as the kids say. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
right.
I mean, I think that's what all academics should sort of admit to the world, is that the things that excite them most are things that excite them most, as in things that generate emotional responses, and intellect, and that's not necessarily separate from an intellectual response. If something really interests me intellectually, it comes with excitement. It doesn't. It's not a raising of an eyebrow. It's like, wow, this is so fascinating. And I just love the fact that with your book you have this real sense that there is this sort of thing called Lynchian, but it exists within an American context. It exists within an artistic context with all these other, as you point out in in Wild at Heart chapter with the music and with the we mentioned in Lost Highway as well how much of the music went into that, and the Inland Empire, pointing to the summation level of that piece of work. I mean, in a way, that's what Twin Peaks: The Return and Inland Empire sort of both fitting bookends to his career, because they kind of are looking back and yet moving forward at exactly the same time.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, what a gift, right? To be able to, because not every artist gets to do that, right? Either because they don't know that this thing they're going to make is going to be it, the last thing, or they aren't given the resources to do it, or don't have a way to wrap their head around it necessarily. And what a gift that one of the more singular filmmakers of our time was able to do that, right, twice. I mean, because really, like, Inland Empire would have been adequate enough for that kind of harnessing of all of the stuff, but then The Return does that even to an even greater degree, and with a more familiar and accessible text, right? So it's just wild that that he was able to do that, not once but twice. And yeah, I think it's important to look at, like, in the way, the thing that you were talking about is sort of that it also be not just Lynchian but American, because this is where I guess I have that um tenuous relationship with auteurism. I'm probably way more of an auteurist than a lot of academics are. I know it's not super fashionable, but, like, I think with my film production background, I'm like, yeah, I mean, like, we can talk about these theories and other forces as much as we want, but on the day, on set, 100 people are looking at one person and asking them what the decision should be, or what the next thing is. And so, like, at a certain bedrock level, like, I on that level, I can't walk away from auteurism, like, because there is a single human being making a decision on the day. But at the same time, there's all this other stuff swirling around, of course. And this is where Lynch, I think, is really useful, because in just writing about it all as Lynchian, as you were, kind of mentioning, that, like, we've got to go beyond that, right? Because he doesn't exist in a vacuum. As much as people want to say he's like Jimmy Stewart from Mars, or everything is sui generis, like it just came out of his head, or like the trailers say, like, from the twisted mind of so and so, like that kind of stuff. I feel like that's the thing that is maybe the dangerous side of auteurism, like thinking that these people don't exist in a context, And what's so amazing, though, is that what we call Lynchian is this post-war American context, to the point where he might be the most adept and authentic and effective chronicler of the post-45 American imagination. Like, he maybe gets it in a greater way than anyone else. And so, but we can't really appreciate that if we only talk about him as Lynchian, as though everything he does can only be Lynchian, or like you were saying, kind of the memification of Lynch or Herzog, where everything Herzog says is, oh, that's such a Werner Herzog thing. And, like, that's accurate to a point, but at a certain point, it's very limiting in terms of understanding the full scope of his art. It's not just the boundaries of his own mind. It is in dialogue with and responding to all of these amazing, incredible changes and forces in the world. And man, what a loss if we didn't talk about those things when we're talking about his work. And I think what's great about The Return, maybe with that stuff about the atomic bomb, is he redirects that conversation back to that in a way that is, of course, more powerful than any scholar could redirect it. He said, like, I've been talking about this. I am thinking about this all the time, in a way that he's gestured toward those sorts of things with, like, Elvis and Wild at Heart or something like that. But, like, the atomic bomb is on a different level, that really asks us to think about his work as American in a way that maybe people haven't been as deliberate about. And and now I think we have to be, and that's all the better for the work and for our understanding of the American imagination.
Absolutely. I mean, it reminds me of David Foster Wallace writing that little essay and talking about him being, America's only surrealist. It's
Yeah.
real. But he is America. He belongs to a place. It's not like he's a European filmmaker. That he isn't. He's highly influenced by Europe as well, but he's his feet are firmly planted in his native soil. And I mean, another thing that just popped into my head when you were saying that as well is how can we watch this, and then we see Oppenheimer, and then we see, and we go, oh my God, he's kind of picked up on something that is still in the air, and we're still, as you say, it's a hyper object that we're still dealing with today. And in a way, it's kind of the return of the repressed Oppenheimer. It's something we haven't talked about for too long, and now we got Oppenheimer, and now we've got House of Dynamite, and all of a sudden it's sort of like, okay, it's right in the forefront of our minds again.
Yeah, well, and I'd be curious, yes, and it's all happening around the time of, I mean, having political leaders who are suddenly more interested in pushing the button, right? Or the mechanics of the button. Yeah, it feels, some of it does feel truly like a return to when I was growing up in the 80s, and there was so much more nuclear fear. I'm thinking of like Red Dawn, Amazing Grace, and Chuck, these other war games, right? These other films at that time where it's like, oh, wow, we're worried about nuclear war again. Like, why? It's like, well, look around, like that. And so there's some of it, I think, that's true. Like, these things are now just back in the air. And yeah, we had kind of we'd fallen asleep had forgotten about those things for a little bit. And then when you wake up and realize, wait, this stuff is around, we still have this. That's frightening. That's nightmarish. That's surreal, but it's also wholly American.
On Russian state TV, there are chat shows where they're talking about, it takes 10 minutes for us to drop a bomb, for a missile to arrive in London, then that comes out. I sometimes think we're even more we're as awake as we are. I think we've the sense of being on the brink happened like a few years ago with the beginning of the war in Ukraine, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. There was a sense that's the closest I felt to the 1980s since the 1980s, since the early 1980s, that sense of how far should we push the Russians? Wouldn't surrender be better than suicide? I mean, that's what House of Dynamite is essentially about. Wouldn't it be better to be attacked and not start the World War III than be attacked and start World War III? I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. Crazy times, Mike. Crazy
now
times.
It's dark.
Oh yeah. Well, there's water and there's a well and there's a horse. The white of the eye is the horse. Somebody somewhere is lying on the floor here with blood.
Right. Yeah. They're just trying to get away, listen to a nice little film podcast to get away from everything. It's like, nope, sorry.
Yeah. Sleep with your mouth firmly.
Yeah,
closed.
we got an hour through, so that was we held off. We fought we fought against it for a while.
Listen, Mike, I absolutely love talking to you. It was such a joy to talk about David Lynch. It's such an enlightening and new way. It was really interesting. It was a great book. I'll put a link to it in the show notes.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me, Mike. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah. No, I had a great time talking to you, John. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Hey, Ryan Reynolds here. Wishing you a very happy half-off holiday because right now Mint Mobile is offering you the gift of 50% off unlimited. To be clear, that's half price, not half the service. Like, Mint is still premium unlimited wireless for a great price. So that means a half day. Yeah?
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speeds slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.